Look, I'm not criticizing you as a person. We should be able to debate issues directly, right? Without, sometimes in some cultures, even in developed markets, we've become too polite. I was Asian women, all the stereotypes you can think of. Asians generally, I mean, statistically, most of us do more than we say. It's not about good or bad. So you need to be able to do well, and you need to be able to speak well.
Hi, I'm Jessica Tan.
Jessica Tan, co-CEO of Ping An Insurance.
China's largest insurer and in the world's second biggest insurance market.
Yeah. With annual revenues of more than $14 billion and market cap of over $68 billion.
Would you be willing to make decisions in the absence of the full truth?
Yeah. You have to become more comfortable by what is the max you lose. We shouldn't feel apologetic, and we should be confident, and even if we're rejected, just keep asking for it. There's no harm. I mean, if I have to kiss 100 frogs before I get my prince, I will kiss 100 frogs.
Last bit on AI. I fear that at the rate that there's only few that can spend the money, it runs a risk of further elitizing the narrative.
If it continues to be controlled in a few handful of companies with the purpose of making more money, then it's going to be more and more diverse.
Hi, we're honored to have Jessica Tan, who is the former co-CEO of Ping An Group. Jessica, thank you so much for gracing our show.
My pleasure.
You've been in so many great places. You've traveled around the world. You've done so much more than what many of us in Southeast Asia would have aspired to do. Talk about how you grew up, how you got educated to be as good as you have become. Please.
Sure. My parents are from Malaysia. We come from humble working class family, and they came to Singapore to work. So I was born and I grew up here. So a couple of things that might be a little bit different. So unlike the more typical Singaporean, as a immigrant, we have to work extremely hard for education and move from one school to another school. So I think growing up here, I was a beneficiary of the meritocratic system here. Right? Basically, I've been told, as Asian parents would tell you, study hard and make a good living. Right? So I think my first kind of 17 plus years of my life was quite relatively straightforward. And I managed to do quite well. I think the second departure for me was then when I wanted to go to the US. So my dad's an engineer. He worked for Texas Instruments for, I think, 20 years.
In Singapore?
In Singapore.
Okay.
He also went back to
Was he more
Malaysia.
Influential in shaping your educational journey?
Yes,
or?
I think so. Okay. I think he's very strong on education, on having a systemic engineering mindset. Problems I remember when I was a kid, I have to justify, if I asked for more pocket money every year, he asked me, my sisters and I, to write essay justifying why we need a raise. So I think we've been brought up in a way that you have to work hard and earn your keep. And then I think he had an opportunity to go to the US. He went there for some attachment in Texas. And then found that US at that time, I think it's in the late 80s, early 90s, was a very vibrant place. And you really can get exposed to a lot. Right. So he was very supportive when I wanted to go to MIT to study.
Why MIT?
I think
it's not a bad school, but
yes, why? I think at that time, to be honest, we come from fairly traditional family. My dad is the eldest of 13 kids in Malaysia. And unfortunately, they always favor male versus female. And unfortunately, we were all girls. So I always wanted to kind of make him proud and do engineering, right? And the hardest core engineering I could think of at that time was electrical engineering. And so MIT naturally came up as one. But he had one condition. He didn't want me to take a Singapore scholarship, right? Which is what typically people of my cohort in those days would do. And so, because he wanted me to really get the benefit of the ability to work there if I want to, and get exposed to different kind of thinking industries and sectors. That turned out, I was quite resistant at that time because actually it's a privilege to be given. I had to turn down a scholarship.
Wow.
I realized later, actually he went through a lot. He actually borrowed money from his credit card. We are quite humble. The five of us stayed in one room when we were growing up to pay for my school fees and later for my sisters. And in fact had to dip into his early pension. And it was, unfortunately, I only realized it the second year when I was there because it was the 97 Asian financial crisis. Wow. And I then realized that we all have money because he then quit his job in order to get his retirement and then set up a consulting business, which was a really bad time in financial crisis to do so. So I think I almost didn't make it. I almost had to come home. But I was very fortunate because that's when I also experienced, I think, MIT US. They were very kind and generous. They gave financial aid for part of my school fees. I had 3 jobs I could work on campus to support it myself. And so I managed to continue. And I think that taught me a lot, right? The MIT education, I'm extremely grateful. It's not just how they think about things, right? They don't have to do so for an international student like myself, right? And it was needs blind. It was purely based on if you needed it. And they didn't look at your grades or anything. And I was also impressed then whereby you can really do anything you want. Right. So growing up in a Singapore education system, we have a very good education, but there are tracks, right? You're in the system and you got to do well in that particular track. And in the US, it was, you can do anything you want. Right. I met my advisor. And I remember in my second year, I was flipping through, those days they still have the paper cost catalogs. And I thought, I want to do optical engineering. I thought all optical fiber was all the rage. It's going to be the new thing. And I just popped by this professor, Herman House, is an Austrian American, a graphy fellow. And I said, look, I want to do some project with you, and I want to do my master's thesis. I was a second year student. He looked at me and he's like, ask a few questions. And then he said, okay, come back tomorrow, same time in my office hours. And then I realized later from my postgrad friends, he's actually a very famous scientist. There are theorems named after him.
Oh, you didn't know at that time?
Oh, I didn't know that. I was just benefit of, I thought it was interesting. I just went to him. And he said, and there's a theorem named after it. The reason he needed one day to think is he had to think of a simpler problem. He never take master's student. And I was a sophomore trying to do my master's as well. He only need postgrad. So he had to think of a simpler problem. Yet still challenging for me. And he did. He was my thesis supervisor for the next 3 years. He hooked me up with Bell Labs. We, did a very interesting stuff that I published and stuff. And I think those experiences taught me that it's not just we work hard and do it. You could do anything you want to. It gave you the capabilities and the confidence you could. And then it then teaches you to ask for higher things, right? What is really impactful? What do I really want to do with my life? And not just because engineering is something my dad likes. And so it took a bit of a twist. So upon graduation, I think in the 6 months up to graduation, you have to think of what you want to do, right? I had interned at Microsoft, and those were the great times. Those were the late 90s. Yeah. Where,
before the bus.
Oh, yes, that's right. Before the bus, and went to Bill Gates' house. They give you nice things. You take helicopter ride in Seattle. So I have an offer to either go there or to Silicon Valley. I could do my PhD in Bell Labs, and be more accomplished, which my dad would have loved. Wow. And then I decided both was not really appealing to me. Well, it took me 3.5 years to figure that out. And by chance of luck, I went to a casino night. It was at John Hancock Tower in Boston. One of the management consulting company, AMS, hosted a casino night there. And I went with my then boyfriend, now husband, for fun. I like to go play games and stuff like that. And then this person kept telling me, oh, there's such a thing called management consulting, which at that time was completely new to me. I didn't even know like people would pay you to do that. And I thought, okay, maybe that's interesting. And I just applied. I said, which is the best? They told me, oh, McKinsey is one of the best. So I applied. And they had a special program then whereby they take in master's student in the science and engineering background. And they said, we don't need you to learn business. We can teach you the business. It's a accelerated program. If you do well, within 1 year, we'll promote you to associate without MBA, right? So I went in the new, okay, I haven't figured out what to do. I'm going to try different industries. And I had so much debt with me that I thought, okay, this is pretty cool. And that's how I went. I went to Chicago, joined McKinsey, and I loved it. For 3 years, at first I thought I'll do 3 years to try different sectors, figure out what I find meaningful to do. And the first 3 years, I did Victoria's Secrets, retail, Best Buy. I did some airlines, e-commerce. We then went to a .com bust, which we saved a couple of telecoms company from bankrupt. I even asked my office manager there, I said, look, I would love to go to Europe. In my 20s, I said, I want to go to Europe. Went to Germany, worked for Deutsche Börse exchange. So we had very varied. I'm very thankful. I think McKinsey gives a wide spectrum for you to learn. And it has the belief that it's about impact and that solving problems is about asking the right questions. And you don't need, you can learn. You don't have to be 30 years in the industry to be actually asked the right question, a structured way to solve it, right? And I think then I fell into financial services. I realized financial services is one whereby capital can be a huge enabler if used properly, actually for the economy, for the people, in certain sense. And I started to get into that sector, first in North America. And then in 2003, I moved back. So
to Chicago or Singapore?
To Singapore.
Okay.
Because
did you ever feel that you were not prepared for any of the stuff that you would have been exposed to while being a consultant?
It is difficult also when I was younger. I was Asian women, all the stereotypes you can think of. Asians generally, statistically, most of us do more than we say, right? And we've been taught throughout that, if you do the best, it will be recognized. You don't have to be too showy, right? And I think getting into work in North America and stuff, you will see much more diverse culture. You realize it's not about good or bad. You have to be able to actually get the sponsorship as well. So you need to be able to do well, and you need to be able to speak well as well. So it takes a lot of learning. I think the first few years, I worked too hard, but I was just a busy bee in the back office. I remember fainting all the time. And I think my manager he was a micromanager. He was very worried. So all kind of failures that you would think that you do, and then you learn to be smart. Right, project after project, you kind of tune in a little bit how you would not just do the content, but also it's quite important because it's client service work, right? It's about the teamwork, it's about clients, and then you gradually learn more and more. And so I've always gone the philosophy. It's a bit like video games. I go by a year. Every year you get maybe 3 lives at the beginning, and then you kind of survive. Once you survive, you level up because you become better. The fact that you survive. If you fail, then you go back to the next level and you restart again. And that has served me well. Yeah. And then I think in 2003, it was quite a also unusual decision. I was doing quite well in the US by then to come back to Asia. I did that because my husband was tired of We were doing the long distance. He's a scholar. So at that time,
he's a physics guy, right?
yes, he's a physics, political science guy, and then
Political science.
Yes, he did political
And
science.
he would have gone to MIT too. With
Yes,
you,
he was
or-
at MIT.
Okay.
He was my dorm mate. We lived next to each other in the co-ed dorm. He was my physics tutor. That's how we got to know each other.
Okay.
And then he came back because of my scholarship.
Sure.
And then for 2-3 years, we were using calling cards those time.
I remember.
And then we would, in the weekend, I would go to Tower Records, rent the same DVD. So we would watch exactly the same time with the phone. I think he was getting tired of that after 2-3 years. So I came back and then got married at 25, fairly young age. And I had to rebuild in Asia. But I was quite fortunate because when I came back, I think China was 2003 was just beginning, and then they look at me and say, "Look, you look Chinese, and you must learn Chinese in school. So you should go to China." I remember Mike, the partner of the office, Saro. He's a Swiss Italian, Swiss French. He said, "No, listen to me. Just go. You'll be right." So I went, and in 2003. Was my first time entering China. And the China then was 20 years ago, was very different. I used to have the pirate to
You would have seen bicycles still.
That's right. But it ended up getting to know Peng An. It was my first climb there. And it was a very ambitious, Peter Ma, the founder and the chairman, and still chairman now, he was very ambitious. At that time, they had operations scattered all over the country. And they wanted to centralize it and build a shared services operations, not just for cost, but for risk control, because people have those chops, and you could be defrauded, right, by anywhere. And we ended up a 1.5-year project. We built the largest shared services operation center in Shanghai. It's one of the proudest projects. You can still see it today. It hosts about 30,000 people in it, and that left a great impression in me because I remember we were all arguing about. It's very difficult to do this. And we even share examples. In the US, they went through first regionalization, then nationwide. And the chairman said, I brought all of you here, internally, externally, to discuss how we can do this, not if we do it, right? And then he left the room.
Wow.
So then I was like 25, 26. I was like, wow, that's gutsy.
Wow.
And we managed to do that. And so it gave me further confidence. This is a country of opportunity, promise. You can overcome many, many challenges that you otherwise, if you can mobilize resources and et cetera to do that. That was my first inculcation into Asia. And then I also, along the way, I always make these decisions that doesn't seem quite natural path. So when I was pregnant with my first girl, I called my partner, Sarah, and I said, I want to come home. I don't want to work in China anymore because I want to be in Singapore. I want to be in Southeast Asia. I want to be able to go home, fly within the area. And he was very supportive. He called another partner. And in the following month, I was on DBS as a client. Then I served DBS, CIMB, MAS. These are clients that I suddenly reset all my clients to Southeast Asia. And for the next, I think, 6-7 years, basically, I just traveled and re-known every country. But it was fulfilling. I had my 2 girls, and I was very glad because even though I'm Southeast Asian, you are not really until you work there. And when you work there, then you realize, each one is so different and so unique. It's not, you gotta be in the market to understand that. So I was very grateful for that. And then, so that's kind of the path of my journey.
When you made a decision to go to Peng An in 2013, it sounds like you would have witnessed how China had evolved.
Yeah.
Right? And I would have thought that it would have been a big plunge for you. But it doesn't sound like it.
No.
Because you would have gotten so familiar with how it's evolved and how it's likely to evolve, right? And you felt comfortable with that.
Well, I think I took a chance because by then I had worked 13 years in McKinsey.
Right.
3 in US, 10 in Asia. I realized 2 things that I was short of. One is I was tired of people telling me that, oh yes, Jessica, you're very smart, but you've never done this before, so it's very difficult to do it. I'm like, okay, I don't think it's that difficult, but so I don't
really
want to
balled you up.
Yeah, I don't want to be told that. I remember going to a client to one of the countries. Every month I would visit him. Right, he would agree with me intellectually that this is the right thing to do, but he would always be hesitant to make the changes. And so I thought, look, I can't live my life constantly telling people what I think. I have to do it myself and figure out, right, if it's difficult, I need to learn how to do it. So that was one motivation. And then the other motivation was, by then, I've worked maybe 10 countries in Asia, and everyone is very different. It's not right or wrong. There's just different stages, different consumer, different market. And I thought, and having been in the US in the late 90s, early 2000s, you need a big homogeneous market.
Yeah.
Right. And that's when you can really see everything get together.
Yeah.
And I bet on China. Right. Ping An then was quite small. Ping An then is probably 1/5 the size as it was.
To what extent do you think homogeneity was a big factor in making Ping An a success story?
I think the macro intrinsics, that China is homogeneous, is at least half of the success.
Wow.
Right. And so I thought you got to be there to learn what it is. You can never learn as a consultant or as a foreign. So between 2 offers, it was an MNC versus this. I thought, okay, let me just go. And I also have a bit of the mindset when you're young, it's okay. Right? What could the worst be happen? Like I said, I'm in my mid-30s. If I fail, I would have had 2-3 years of really good experience in China, and I'm still young enough. I'll start again. So it was with that mindset I went. So it's a lot more culture shock than you have to. It's very different working for a Chinese company. The first thing
it would have been very. I'm speculating a bit chauvinistic, maybe.
Ironically not. Actually,
really?
Ironically,
well, China, I guess, but not Ping An. Right?
No, China because
was
of
already
communism.
changing in a big way at that time.
Because of communism, actually, women during the communist time, women hold up half the sky. Right, that was the slogan. And actually, as a women leader, I probably face more stereotypes in actually Southeast Asia than in China. So I think that was not so much. I think it was more cultural gap, because although I'm ethnically Chinese, 3-4 generations.
You talk about those 3 gaps, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Culture,
age gap, language gap. It was just different. I may speak the Chinese.
But your Mandarin is pretty good.
It's become better. I'm fortunate. My parents were Chinese educated. They went to Taiwan. We spoke Chinese at home, but that's conversational Chinese. That's not business, right? I used to tell my team, you have to bear with me. In English, I can probably communicate 10 different nuances of the same message. In Chinese, I may have 1 or 2, like yes, no, maybe 3. So it took a while. And also managing large people, right? It's a large organization. My first role was a group CIO and the CEO of the tech company. It was 3,000 people. Well, later on, I have 500,000 people. So I had 10 years to grow from learn how to manage 3,000 to 500,000. But 3,000 was
total
was
number
tough.
of employees is 700,000, right?
The whole employees of about 700, 800,000.
Wow. And you manage 5/7 of those.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You learn to be really good with people, all walks of people. You learn social skills. You learn to drink very well. First week, I collapsed on stage because I didn't pace myself well enough. But these are, I think, important skills. And I get to love it. I enjoy getting to know people. And that's part of having worked in different countries.
Talk about how you went about the transition as to attain a position of leadership.
Yeah.
And then talk about how you manage to stay grounded.
Yeah.
You know, it's so easy to give you a big head, right?
Yeah.
how did you stay humble while at the top?
Yeah.
But talk about the transition as to attain that
Sure.
position of leadership.
I think the transition, the toughest is, well, I think in the McKinsey training gives me a very good analytical view of things, which is a strength.
Yeah.
Because if you work in large companies, particularly, most of the people have grown up vertically. They've taken certain things to be granted, right? Whereas I think analytically, you will see more macro. You look at the issues much more objectively, and then you can figure out what the right answer is. As a leader, it's most important that you know where you're going, because if you're wrong, you're causing problems to many people. And then the ability to execute involves the people, right? So the biggest the difference I have to adapt is actually how to work with the people, not just your teams, but others, to mobilize them to do stuff, and also be able to hear different points of views and solve tactical issues. And then I think more importantly, get them to take risks. Right? That was the most important. When I inherited the IT team, Ping An then was known to be a very good IT shop, but it's an order taker shop, right? They were afraid, they were measured on how fast you deliver, how cheap is it, right? They're not going to build big data and whatever, right? So hiring new people, that I went to Silicon Valley, my data scientist was from Bing. He doesn't know insurance or financial services. When I really flew to Cupertino, have sat down with him, make sure he's real, and really try and convince him to come and work for us. So getting new people in, and then somehow you have to also make them work together. I described to my team later on, bringing people in is like, I don't know if I reared fish when I was young. When you have new fish, you buy the packet, you don't just put them in the tank. You put them in the bag, and then you let them acclimatize both the water temperature as well as the other fish get to know this fish, and then you release it. So you have to learn to be how you build teams, getting new people, figure out who, they may not have the capability, but if they have the will, you help them succeed. And there are some that they just need to be removed, right? So I think that part is probably the one that took me, the first 2-3 years to really kind of work this out really well. And then to your second question, that's a great question.
I mean, I'd feel very differently if I got 500,000 people working for me.
Yes, it's very tough because I first started with...
Because you got to have the right ecosystem that pulls you back to earth.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. Otherwise, you can be very busy. You could have meetings every day.
You get cocky. You get arrogant.
That's right. So I was fortunate because I started off as the CEO of one company, and then later on, second year I get like 2-3 companies. So I was built. So I've ran individual things before. So that was an advantage because as I added more every year or so, you have become very familiar with this business and the people. So, in my companies, I don't just know the CEOs. I have 10 companies underneath me. It's not just CEOs or their management team. There's just 100 people. I know even the next department head, right? And it would probably have been difficult if I was just parachuted, but because I was the CEO of one company, I knew these people. I could even call today and get the database head. I know exactly who he is, and I know his strength. So it keeps you grounded in this area. And the other thing is that I find it very helpful to be grounded on the numbers too. So I have a team that supports me where I can go very deep into issues. Where there are strategic projects that I would be very hands-on. We'll talk about healthcare later. When we were building the elderly home care, every month I was having me. I would go to the front line. You have to, the leader had to choose, but you have to be very careful because you don't want to overstep. And then your subordinates might feel that, this person is trying to encroach the space. So I'm very clear about this is business as usual thing. This is your accountability. I measure you by the result. But there are strategic longer term stuff, the 3-year, 5-year thing, the cross-cutting things. These projects, I'll spend a lot of time there, and it keeps me grounded on the issues. It also helped me to be relevant to them because you got to add value to a team. Otherwise, it's just an overhead. And then that also gives me a lot of joy learning about things. Yeah.
I want to peel the onion a bit more on the culture, right? You've been known as being hard on issues, soft on people. You write birthday cards, handwrite, to hundreds of your employees, at least, right? And you're very highly numerically literate, right?
Yes.
I mean, talk about those two different boxes.
Yeah.
How you get very hard on issues, but you get very soft on people.
Yeah. I think the hard on issues, because I believe a good leader needs to have three attributes. One, as I said, you need to be strategic to know what's the right thing to do. Because the heavy responsibility is that, if you made a wrong mistake, you may not see it now in a year or two, you'll see it 3 years, 5 years, and it affects people, right? And here, my strength has to be analytical. Right? I will listen to a lot of people for different views and stuff, but ultimately, I believe the numbers objectively will show you what's the right thing to do. Let's say, I always start 5 years out, right? Because when you are looking at just the next year, you have a lot of constraints that you can't do. So I always work with my team to do a 5-year vision first, 3-year, 5-year, and then we all agree like, this is the right thing. Then we work backwards, right? If you have to get there within 3 or 5 years, then this is what you have to do. So I think the numbers part helped me understand business really well. So my life actuarial, he said, you're the most senior executive that squeezed us. I go around meetings with a calculator. It's actually embarrassing. I've deteriorated to only calculator. I can't do differential or integration anymore. But it helps me, and I've thankfully good memory. So then it also can be rapport with the next level down, right? People who are actually doing this.
It's got to be really scary to your subordinates.
No, it's actually really fun.
Good memory.
They're really, yes, that's true. They're very scared at first. When they have meetings, sometimes they have tons of backbenchers because the senior executives cannot remember as much. So they have backbenchers with laptops just in case I ask a question or something. But I think it also sets a discipline. I wanted to inculcate a culture within my companies that, look, we got to be fact-based. Because especially Chinese companies tend to be more hierarchical, right? Usually the most junior person speak, then more senior, and then the most senior person will then make a decision. Very few things can be so easily done, right? So I wanted to inculcate whereby people who have facts and numbers, no matter even if you're a backbencher, you should be able to feel free. So in meetings, I use this opportunity. They've been very scared. There sometimes their hands were shaking, and I joke, I'm not going to eat you out. Don't worry. If he makes a good point, I will actually call his name, right? No matter what level it is. And I say, oh, that's a great point. We should look into that. So I think that part, it may not be well liked by some people because culturally it's a bit different. But I think it's quite important. And some of the people have grown then to like that more. So that's one part. The second attribute I always thought is because you have to be able to execute, and it's then about people. Right, that's the part we said about soften people. Because I'm so scary, even though I'm a very nice person. So I know I have to make up and let people know, look, I'm not criticizing you as a person. Right? We should be able to debate issues directly, right? Without, sometimes in some cultures, even in developed markets, we become too polite.
Right. Because
we see, if I say this, the other person might not think it's offended. But if we're good for the company, right, we should create the environment to do it. So I try to then make up for that to show people, look, I'm not against individuals, right? So I do not just birthday cards. From the top 100, I get involved in a lot in their evaluation, development opportunity. Just like I have the benefit of being, mentored and trained, I'll put them into different roles to develop them. I'll have very frank conversations like, oh, you're really good at this, but this is not so good, right? So I'm going to put you in this role. You have to be up for it, right, to do that. And then I do a lot of team events. Because especially when you're 3,000 people, you can get away with that. When 500,000, you got to do the team events too. So I travel quite a lot across China. I probably do maybe 10 plus provinces. Wow. So at least one, if not two cities a month. I will usually visit not just the management team, but the agents. We have 350,000 agents. And they're the ones, I'm really touched by agents. I've grown to love insurance. I'm not a veteran insurer, but insurance, our agents it's one of the rare profession, regardless of education and background, you can make a living. So I remember, I was so touched. One of this top agent, she told me she's from Shenyang. And when she was 18, she ran away from home. She borrowed money from her brother. She said, I don't want to stay in Shenyang. I want to go to big city. She borrowed money, took a train to Beijing. And then she realized because she's not very educated, it was very difficult to get a job in Beijing. And she was selling buns on the streets. And then she so happened that she sold buns outside our office, which is our agency office. And then she thought, what kind of company is this? Because every morning we'll have morning meetings. And there were so many people coming through to do that. And it's like, this looks like an interesting company. Then say, regardless of education, you can make 1 million yuan. Right. If you work hard and we'll train you to it. And she joined us. This was 20 plus years ago. She's now one of our top agents. Wow. And she's then grown. She has 100 people that she worked in the agency. And so I'm very inspired by people like that. So when you're 500,000 people, because these are the people who, the first time I went, I said, no, thank you, because all of us pay, it's actually by you. We make about 20 billion US dollar profit. It's a lot. 70% come from life insurance, of which, most of it come from the Asia. I said, thank you very much. I mean, every day, the morning meetings about handling rejection, because insurance is one. So if you sit in there, a meeting is about, how you shouldn't be rejected. You got to talk about it. So I was so inspired by them. And it was during COVID times. So for 1 year, it was a very bad times. They were all very down. So that inspired me even more to really it's not just doing the business so that we can earn money. It's about, I want them to have a good living with us. So we had to make very tough decisions, soft on people in the sense that you really care about the people. But sometimes we also had to change. So we had to shrunk our sales force. It was a very tough decision because even though at peak we had almost like 1 million people, but insurance industry is such that only the top 20% are stable and the rest just keep cycling through. So it's not the same 1 million people, but that's how you grow. And so we had a very controversial, and I was very firm with my team. I said, we got to change this because we want the people who work for us make a living for life. It's not, I use you for 6 months, 9 months, and then you're gone. So we kept most of the people who were stable. We grew them. We doubled their income during COVID. So I'm extremely proud of that. It made a real difference. The people who originally stayed with us continue to stay. We added more. It's just that we stopped their incentives to just hire and attrit. And I think that kind of motivates people to do stuff. So this kind of managing people, I think if you have to really be with people to understand, you sing karaoke, it's okay that I get drunk in a while because they're human. And I think I've developed a reputation, at least even though I'm not mainland Chinese, that I'm genuine, and hopefully people can see that. Right. And that I may not agree with you all the time, but the decisions are trying to be for the good of the company and for everyone involved. And then if I'm wrong, we'll iterate, right? Nobody's perfect. And so I wanted to kind of do that, yeah.
You talked about you're having interviewed at least 100 people a year.
Yeah.
I'm curious as to how you spot a talent. And especially if you meet up with a female candidate.
Yeah.
Do you tend to be harder on her or softer on her? Or you're just the same on both, female or male?
For me, it's been quite the same. Well, having been female and stuff, and I have two girls. Our whole family is like girls. So for me, I think I notice these less. So I usually, and over the years, I found usually I like to ask the person about their background, right? Choices that they make. Why did they pick this to study, right? Why did they go here? Why did they do this? So it's more about the why than the what, because the what is, whatever is on the CV, but the motivation behind, because I think this speaks to what this person really is trying to look for. And you see some CVs, it's great names, but they only stay in every job every 2-3 years, and then they always skip. And you feel, okay, this is a person that he may be very good, but he or she may be very good, but the motivation is different, right? So I think motivation is quite important because a lot of things we do, you have to really genuinely believe it, because it's not, businesses under me are not easy. I'm not going to be okay, growing at a certain rate. This is just breathing the air. That's what you're supposed to do, right? So I think that's important. And then I think there's the second part is then about tenacity. And this I only learned later on because I made a couple mistakes when we were especially setting up new businesses. And sometimes we find people with the right qualifications, like when we first start healthcare, we try to look for either the tech industry because it's online, or the healthcare industry. And then we realized that, okay, domain knowledge sometimes is difficult. So adversity, perseverance is quite important, and having an open mind, both on issues and people, right? Because another common problem is that people are not they're more conservative in using people, and the saying is true. I've learned if you are an A person, you don't mind getting A+ team. But when you're a B, you get C team. It's actually really true. So I think that characteristic, the open-mindedness in both issues and people, as well as tenacity, to me became much more important later on. Yeah.
Wow. Now, your chairman, is he typical of all the other leaderships in China in terms of showing open-mindedness? Because he seems like a guy who can try to find the right balance between the force of preservation and the force of innovation, right? And that takes a lot of open-mindedness.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, Ping An has stood out like you wouldn't believe, right?
Yeah.
Unlike many other Chinese companies. Do you see that as an occurrence that's happening in many other Chinese companies?
I think there are the entrepreneurs in my chairman's time have gone through the past 40 years in China through various stages of reform. And the people who survive are people with the right set of characteristics, right? Which is a balance of foresight, and taking entrepreneurial risk in areas. So I learned a lot from them, and have that open-mindedness, because China for a long time, if I look back in the 2003s, 20 years ago, they just want to catch up,
right?
Because they lost so much time. So they were very eager to learn. They would pay to learn. They would get people to accelerate. If it took 10 years for someone else to do it, can we do it in 5, 3? Right? And then I think China back then in about 2015 was when I realized that actually in certain areas, it's not about catching up anymore. They have to innovate beyond, because competition within China is so keen. Right? And I think entrepreneurs of that generation, because they've grown up in this time, have those attributes, right? Because if they haven't, they would not have survived.
They wouldn't survive. Yeah.
And I'm very grateful. I think it's one of the things I learned how to take entrepreneur, because frankly, having grown up, as a Singaporean, as a McKinsey consultant, we are taught to shoot down things, right? You give me something, I'll tell you 10 reasons, all the problems you can find. We're not as good as taking the entrepreneurs. And with him, I learned that a lot. And to learn, that's why I learn now to look at 3 years, 5 years, right? If this makes sense, then all the others are for us to figure out how you get there. And I think that's a very valuable attribute for any successful entrepreneur. Yeah.
Last bit on culture, more in the context of how decisions get made.
Yeah.
You know, if you would have heard the Jeff Bezos of the world, he would have, you know, he was quoted as saying that he got lucky with Amazon,
Yeah.
having succeeded the way it did by making decisions on the basis of two things. The first one would have been compromises, meaning if they need to figure out the length of a ladder, somebody says 7 feet, the other one says 8 feet,
Yeah.
that's compromise, that's 7.5. The other one would have been on the basis of war of attrition. Whoever could argue better in a meeting room usually gets to decide, or his or her view would be the basis on which decisions get made.
Yeah.
But he's realized that mistake,
Yeah.
which is why, with respect to Blue Origin, he wants to make decisions on truth.
Yeah.
Where are you on this, or where have you been on, you know, with respect to any of these three?
I think decision making, there are big and small decisions. I think the big decision, for example, when we're in Ping An, the decision at the beginning to invest in technology, not just strategically, was a big decision. Right? And for us to do it in healthcare, again, it's a very strategic big decision. I think these big decisions has to be debated in a very small group, and then the leader in the end have to decide, right or wrong, right? Because it can go either way. Because this is like standing on top of a very tall mountain and then seeing very far away, and you have to take accountability for that, right? So I think that would be the how to get there, which to me are the smaller decisions, right? Because let's say I want to do healthcare as a concept, right? It's not difficult in that sense to say, okay, it makes sense because healthcare is growing, is needed, there's some synergies in insurance, etc. But the actual business model of what healthcare do I do, right? How am I going to offer it? How am I going to still make money because ultimately it's economically sustainable, right? And compete. These are then maybe the latter decisions that you were talking about. I think these need to be much more widely debated because people closer to the ground get a better feel. So it might not be a strategy. And I tell my chairman sometimes that, right? Because he say, "Oh yeah, you got to get there. Right? Why are you not there?" And I say, "Look, you're a god. You're like on the mountain, but we're mortals. Maybe I'm on the mid level. There are like, you know, obstacles you got to make around to get it. But trust that we will get there, right? So I think those type of decisions needs to be much more democratized. And you need to create an environment for people to do that. But the common challenge I see is that some organizations, both in my previous life working for McKinsey and also in Ping An, is that sometimes when it's too democratized, people get stuck because there's no right or wrong, and everyone can be right? And so I think as a leader, you need to set a condition. Okay, we're taking some risk, right? So I'm going to make a left turn now. It's okay, right? The rest of you, I hear you, right? And then we'll take pauses, right? If within 3 months, 6 months, whatever isn't right. Okay, it's not. We'll just make a little turn back. So you have to set that balance between someone needing to make a call at a certain point in time, yet still doing it. And then I think that's kind of the best for me. That hopefully that I try to create, but it's very tough. Yeah.
Would you be willing to make decisions in the absence of the full truth?
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes you got to bet, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And this just sort of like takes us back to what Kissinger,
yeah,
he would have referred this to as a conjecture. Sometimes you got to conjecture.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
In the absence of the full facts.
Yes.
Because you got the missiles coming.
Yeah.
To your city, and you got to make a decision based on how facts or how truth or whatever.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think in a perfect world, you have all information.
Yeah.
But often, sometimes there's some time critical one that you have to decide. And here, for me, you have to become more comfortable by what is the max you lose.
Yeah.
So this is a bit back to casino. So my philosophy for gambling.
That's a great story.
I'm a social gambler. I just like the fun of it. If I lose a certain amount, I'm just going to leave, whatever.
Okay.
Right. So you're not going to bet
lost.
down.
You set the limits.
I think it's the same for business too.
Yeah.
I say sometimes when you do certain things, I talked about agents when there were so many different voices. Of what we should do, give more money, all sorts of things, right? And you don't really know, but you have to decide because people are waiting, and so you do, and then, but the worst, maybe the easiest is lose money. Actually, because money can be earned, but it's a confined period. Most of our innovations and stuff. I capped it around 1 day of our taxes. So I said, okay, don't have to stress out so much. If we're wrong, it's okay. We'll work harder and we'll make back that 1 day of taxes, right? So I think knowing what's your bottom line, but you also just keep monitoring. So you have to keep, okay, this person said, is this, right? You look for markers, right? Is it correct? Right? If after 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, six months, it's not changing, right? Or whatever you have assumed it to be the truth is not. Then you also, the leader also have to come out and say, we're wrong, right? And it's okay, because most of us don't like to say we're wrong. But I think that's quite important because sometimes you become so vested. That's the worst thing, right? And then you just keep sticking to it. But if you can do this, actually most organizations are dynamic enough to be able to absorb that. And I find actually the employees, the staff are actually better if you come out and say you're wrong. My first speech to life insurance was that we made 4 mistakes, we're wrong. We were wrong X, because everyone blamed the economy, blame COVID, blame whatever, right? And then the headquarters blamed life, and life blamed the agents. And so I decided, I stood on stage and I said, look, I'm a newcomer. I said, look, we were wrong 1, 2, 3, 4. And it was very well received. Surprisingly, I think it took a bit of risk, but I think people want the truth or the genuine answer that you have at that time. As you say, you may not have the full truth at that particular point, but you're transparent with it. And I find that usually people can understand, yeah.
It was just pretty shocking to hear Bezos. I mean, with respect to Blue Origin, he would say, if I don't have the truth, I'm okay with not making a decision.
Yeah.
I guess it comes down to the margin of error.
Yeah.
That the kind of business they're in, they can't.
Yeah.
Fool around with that kind of margin. Also, probably
sense of urgency. Do you have to? Because I don't know the context in which you make that. Well,
you're sending a spaceship, right, to the outer space.
Because
it's about life.
I would imagine that. They can. It's okay if they don't do it.
Yeah.
Then, right?
It's all about saving lives.
That's right. That's right.
So that makes it a little bit more understandable.
That's right. That's right. But if you were, for example, taking over a kind of a business, let's say it's declining.
Right.
Right. And when it's declining, that's the worst time because everyone blames everything and nobody has a constructive thing to what we do. Sure. Right. And you can see it project out. And therefore, and then maybe if you have not have the full, view. I certainly didn't have the full view when I first was plunging. I was not the first choice, like the second person. Yeah, I was like, are you sure you give me life insurance just when it's like at the depths of stuff? And that time when the sense of urgency is that you have to make something, right. That you have to choose the lesser evil, but then you make it with parameters, right? That you can sustain. But I can understand when you're talking about space and lives, and he's okay that you have to do it this year. You can do it. Then right. I think that margin of error, frankly, he cannot afford. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to talk about technology, healthcare, and education, but I want to set the stage.
Yeah.
And I want to put this in the context of how Southeast Asia has compared with China. And then I kind of talked about this with you earlier, how the GDP per capita of Southeast Asia in the last 30 years has only grown 2.7 times versus China 10 times. And it's highly identifiable as to why. Massive underinvestment in education in Southeast Asia, massive underinvestment in infrastructure, lack of governance, and lack of competition or competitiveness, right? Let's talk about technology, right? You've spent a lot on AI. You've gone Ping An to be able to research over 600 million customers. You've been able to reimburse to clients over claims in like minutes. You've done facial recognition, image recognition, all that good stuff. It takes a lot of money. Southeast Asia doesn't have a lot of money. Talk about this.
Yeah. I think first, I think having been in China for, 20 years and the past 10 years kind of being really on the ground, I think the growth is really helped by, as you said, both the hard and the soft infrastructure. Right? And that entrepreneurial spirit, which is kind of that ties everything together, and the competition kind of pushes you to be better and better. Right? So we used to say in China, no self-respecting entrepreneur would think of just being good in, let's say, Hangzhou. Right? They at least think best in China, if not the world. So now maybe a lot of people will make it, but if they try to shoot for 10, they might drop to 3, and it's still okay, still better than 1. So I think those 3 factors really help kind of push the boom and one of the best times there. Now coming then, you talk about how technology then plays a role in this, and how money is being characterized. It's good to invest when you are in a growth stage. I've learned that. So that's why when we were doing it, when we first started, and we had to make a case to our board, it was a bit of a bet, right? Because even in AI, you're not able. At that time, it was still the early big data, machine learning days. We're just learning to do Hadoop and stuff. It's hard to say what the impact is going to be. Right? And so we came with a different view. Was that okay? We're going to spend 1% of our revenue on R&D. Right? I'm not going to be able, like the other projects, to be able to show you all the business case impact and stuff for this 1%. But look, the whole world is going there. Big data, etc. At that time, we had strong competitions from the tech companies. And then we also made the argument, financial services, if you look at it, it's a hundreds euro decade. It's a very capital intensive, regulated industry. You can see how kind of goes, right? And we said, look, we kind of need to be innovative, because Ping An was also unique. It kind of forces you. If we were a state-owned company being very large, you'd be fine, right? Ping An being large, we're still small in size relative to others. So I think that kind of helps you. Oh, I need to do something. But that investment is also something manageable, right? And then in terms of quantity, I think you can do this. If you're a big company, so our tax was 300 million yuan, so that's divided by that's 60 million Sing. Okay, so that's a pretty big number. If you're a smaller company, even if it's 110, 6 million you could also do something. So of course, it limits the amount of things we talked about, particularly in AI, right? There's a couple attributes you kind of need to have. Putting money aside, you need to have the data. You need to have good people who build the right models. And then you need to have the use cases to use it. Because I think that's where China in the past 10 years have really grown, because the consumers and the businesses are much faster in adopting many of these. So I remember even medical imaging, right? Which today seems like a no-brainer, but 7, 8 years ago, when we first built our AI medical imaging, and I went to US, I went to Google Health, I went to many places, and they have all these models, but it was very difficult for them to convince hospitals to deploy. And so even though that was an edge, because you didn't use it, right, China then leapt into this. So I think if you have these 3 cases, from Southeast Asia standpoint, I think we certainly have a lot of use cases. We have vibrant markets.
Sure. 700 million people.
Yeah, and our people are young. A lot of them are very mobile friendly, much more than the developed markets in other parts of the world. And so I think we have the use cases. Data is a little bit less organized and clean. We describe data. It's not like you lock them in like scrap metal in a warehouse and then suddenly you can use them. So it takes a bit of effort, but it's something that can be done. It took us 3+ years to really sort through and make data usable and stuff. So I think our biggest challenge is actually talents. Right? I think money in sizable.
There's a lot of liquidity in the world.
Yeah,
you can attract that money.
That's right.
Just got to make the place hospitable.
That's right.
The way Singapore has.
Exactly. Right. I think that if you can get the talents to want to work and do that, right? Yeah. Because we are growing, you cannot speak globally. Yeah. There are very few regions that can grow at, say, 5% now, right? And the sense of it, energy, I just went around to different parts of Southeast Asia. It's just fantastic. It's a can-do attitude, young, diligent. So I think if we can solve, I think, the talent issue and get different types of talents who understand the local market and the industries and domain expertise talents to work together, I think it will be fantastic.
You've been pretty pronounced on this. When it comes to the US and China, they've got much better chances of acing it on AI because they've got the data, they've got slash market, they've got talent, they've got money. I'm with you. I think Southeast Asia has a huge market, and it can figure out its way on data, right? It can figure out its way on money. It just needs to make itself more hospitable to money because there's a lot of money beyond Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
On the last bit, talent. And this takes us to the education part, right? You've been very passionate about this. You've been getting Ping An to do lots of really fancy dandy stuff on education, right? But I want to set the stage. You've got, in Southeast Asia, there's only 2 countries that are above the global average of PISA, just a non-tertiary attainment of lingual proficiency and STEM proficiency. Then you don't have a lot of engineers in Southeast Asia. You don't have a lot of doctors like in China, in absolute and relative terms. Doctors, you've been talking about 4.5 million doctors in China. Yeah. Southeast Asia only has 500,000 doctors. That's less than 0.1% of the population of Southeast Asia. Whereas China, 1/3% of the population of China, as in doctors.
Yeah.
How do we get these up?
Yeah.
And how do you think the role of AI could be or should be to help move the needle so that we get our act together?
Yeah.
In due time.
I think it's a great question. I think there may be 2 things that might be helpful, and this could be an opportunity, right? Because if you were to play by the traditional rules and games, as we've seen in the past decade, it will use, I think it'll be very hard to close the gap. Yeah. I think there's 2 things that I think might be helpful. I think one is on specialized talent. We talked about doctors, we talked about teachers. Very few countries would say they have sufficient good quality doctors and teachers. So even China, even though they have 4.5 million doctors, not all the doctors are the same caliber of doctors. We worked with village doctors, which are more quack doctors. but and no way they can even with their engine, right? Even though they have 10 million graduates a year, be able to fill that gap. And with Southeast Asia, even tougher, right? So I think technology, particularly AI, could help. Right? We've seen in cases in financial services, in healthcare, and a little bit in education when we used to run the third largest online education company in China. That the AI part it's not to replace the human, but it can improve their quality and productivity significantly. So I use doctors as an example. We started Good Doctor online telemedicine, right? So at first it was just about centralization, right? Instead of having you as a doctor sitting in the hospital waiting for a patient to come, we centralize you, and then you're able to see, patients more efficiently, right? You get about 30+% productivity improvement that way, right? Later on, I think since 2018, we started to build our own AI medical. I think we had 3 versions so far. The first version was really more like a clinical decision support system. So what we did was we trained our AI model. At the time it was large language, but it was not the generative AI. We let it read all the WHO guidelines, read all the medical books, all the 180,000 drug prescriptions and side effects, everything. I read 40 million literature in every language that's published in Lancet everywhere. So it becomes a really good machine. One of the things about good machine learning is that they are very good at remembering, right? Which any doctor, even the best doctor, cannot remember everything. So I think we used that as a clinical decision support. We deployed it in almost 1 million doctors. We worked with actually the government in different ministries to supplement particularly the lower tier hospitals. And that they would, when the doctor makes a certain prescription or a treatment, they would be able to look at the AI decision and it will show you, okay, based on these symptoms, this clinical path is more likely than X and Y. And then if they choose something different that is statistically different, it gets escalated to the next level doctor who takes a second look. And I think that was 2018, right? It's absolutely doable in Southeast Asia today. It doesn't even take a lot to do it. And I think that immediately will get a kick, right? And then I think in 2021, we made another big leap through. We wanted to show, because we were getting a lot of pushback. Our pushback was the doctors themselves, because they're like, oh, no, I'm way smarter than the machine, even though the machine read everything. So we actually participate in the competition. So that was my idea. I said we should do a Turing test for medical. So the AI Turing test, every year they would do that. Sure. And you're supposed to guess whether it's, a human or, so we worked with 6 specialist doctors, 2 from Singapore, 2 from Brazil, 2 from China. And then we we worked with I think it's the International Diabetes Federation. They organized the event. They have a set of specialist judges. And then it's a blind test, right? Every case they see 2 answers, one from doctor and one from our ASPOT doctor, right, which is the AI. And then they mock the test, right? And overwhelmingly, our AI doctor get 92.4 points.
Let me guess.
I think the physical doctors, the 6 specialists, so I'm sorry that they had to do with like 80 something, right? Even the best doctor got 92, right? And I actually look at the answers, right? So I really looked at it. Why is it that? So the AI does 2 things better. When they ask questions, right? Because in the doctor, there's 2 frame of mind. First is getting all the symptoms and stuff so they can triage and decide what ICD code, what condition you have, right? Then it's about the treatment part, right? So the machine overwhelmingly is better at asking a thorough thing so they get the fuller view and not by biases by doctors. And then the treatment, they're also more thorough, right? Now that being said, we did that to actually show that, look, you have to use it. It can help you. It's like a tool. It's like a laptop, right? It's not to replace you. And then to now, I think fast forward to now 2023, last year we started to upgrade that version 3 with Gen AI. And we now use it live on our Good Doctor online. So we said, look, since we operate doctors ourselves. So now last year, I think about 15 million consultations. Now we are at the point, I checked earlier last month, we're essentially able to get 98% of the triaging completely done by the AI. Right? And you can imagine that saves a lot of time and much better. The treatment part we still give to the doctor to basically, because it's the doctor's judgment, but it's basically supplemented by what I call the decision. And all the record keeping, because they have to keep notes, is completely AI as well, right? That has basically doubled, tripled the productivity, right? So I think to first one, I think really for these specialized things, the same with teachers. We started to do this, for primary school teachers about what they should learn in functional points in math, English and stuff. I think for these, you can really accelerate what they can do and solve a little bit of the gap on the number. And I think the second thing to solve the people issue is we have to change the mode of operating. Our mode, I'm surprised in some industries have been left intact, untouched. The tech industry online, since the 90s with the internet, has revolutionized certain industries. I think retail being one, right? E-commerce. Even in most other sectors, it's still very traditional. The mode of operating, we talk about healthcare. Sure. Most healthcare spend, 80-90% still go to hospitals, which is acute care, right? It's not the best spend of money. We all don't have enough money to spend on healthcare. Everyone knows since, decades ago, it's about primary healthcare, preventive healthcare, chronic disease management, infectious disease management. Acute care is really the last resort, right? But because of the mode of operating, it's been very difficult to change. I've worked with the Chinese various governments to do that. It's very difficult to make that shift. And so I think the opportunity to change the model, right? Just like how retail has changed e-commerce. Right. I think, if we really want to solve this problem, you gotta set up new operating models, right? You have to have online versus offline. And I've done this with our team before. We actually mapped out there's about 30,000 diseases recognized under WHO. Amazing. That's a third that can be treated completely online. Right? A third, which is can be a combination online, offline. There's some diagnostics tests that you're gonna do offline. Okay. And then a third that really needs to be offline, right? I think this online, offline company can get access, particularly like Indonesia, when you're very widespread, right? You can get access. So even in China, in the far out places, we serve, one of our clients is one of the shipping companies. They constantly have people on the ships, right? So you get remote healthcare and even second opinion, right? So many of our people, when you have things and then you listen to one doctor, we need a surgery, or we don't, right? Immediately we link specialists integrated and you get a second opinion. And chronic disease, right? A lot of the diabetes, that is such a big problem, but it's a simple thing. But the moment you don't control well, it's 3 times the cost. And it's so bad on the person's health because you have complications, it's 6 different complications. So I think if you can change that, mix digital as a glue to kind of change the operating model, I think it could change a lot in healthcare, in education as well. Education can be so much, you talk about great teachers. It's very difficult to just get great teachers. But with online learning, my girl learns coding from China. We can learn, even in Singapore, you have these Chinese tuition centers. They're going to be obsolete.
Well, I've been a much bigger believer of teachers than curriculum. Yeah, that's right. What I found would have been that many teachers nowadays are not great at inciting curiosity, right? What we need to teach the younger generation is how to be curious. Yes. Not just formulation of a certain framework. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I do believe that at the rate that we don't have a lot of great quality teachers, AI, I think, could be very, very helpful in this. Yeah, and I think even the hard part, like the formula, the concept, you're gonna remember, that part can be more efficient with AI. Yeah. So I remember we built before, like just math, right? If you get 70 points in math, as a parent, I would say, okay, try harder, and then you just keep doing,
exercises and exercises.
Right.
But we managed to map out all the function points such that if you get 70, it shows you which concept are you not good at, right? And you only learn that concept, right? And so it makes the hard part more efficient. So it reduces time because kids these days sometimes also spend a lot of time saying. And then I think more important is like what you said, the curiosity, the thinking part, right? Which is not taught in many schools. And it requires teachers. And you need to get good people. You need to get interesting stuff.
Singapore, Korea, and China, and Japan too, they're so dogged on selecting teachers from the top percentile. And then it shows.
Yeah.
If you recruit teachers from the top percentile and you pay them well enough, they're going to be able to do so many things with the students.
Do you think there's an opportunity in even early childhood?
Absolutely. Well, the brain formation, 90% of that takes place until you're 9 years old.
That's right. Yeah.
So you've got countries that are so exposed to stunting, lack of nutrition and lack of software because the teachers are coming from the bottom percentile.
Yeah.
You're exposed. You get a kid out in school for 14 years, K1, K2, and first grade until the 12th grade. It'd be tough for him or her to get accepted at NUS or MIT or whatever grade schools there are in the respective countries because of that lack of quality of teaching.
Yeah.
And I think AI can do a lot on this.
Look, one of the things I was talking to a friend who does, they started with Gen AI storybooks.
Right.
So to your point about pre-child, early childhood, right? Because if you can use it in gaming, because we're now using gaming to like different stories and stuff. So they're trying to actually create these software that you could be adaptive to the kid, right? As the story, you don't just learn Cinderella. That it can be, tailored, and you can ask questions. It's interactive, because this could be one. Because it's going to be hard to get great quality teachers, even particularly at early childhood.
Yeah.
But if part of it can be done in that area, and it would also change the view of parents letting their kids use, pads or whatever device that can be, affordable and accessible. Yeah.
Back on healthcare, how do you think? What do you think should be done with the pre-existing doctors and the incoming doctors by way of the presence of AI? Do you see the need or huge need to retrain many of the pre-existing doctors so that they know how to use this technological capability a little bit better? Do you see the need to actually supplant the training modules for the incoming doctors?
Yeah. I think in healthcare, I think there are three parts of the delivery system that needs to be tweaked a bit. The main part is what I said, the acute healthcare. When people are sick, they come to you, be in a clinic or a hospital or something, right? This part, I think is to add in the online, the tech area, and you have to lead by example. I mean, we have an 8,000 bed healthcare group too. It's just very painful. Doctors are more difficult to change than actually bankers. I'm sure teachers will be somewhere there as well.
Not to mention the egos.
Yes. Right? So I think that one needs to start. We went through specialization by specialization. It's painful, but you got to do it. It's also not rocket science. And I think that has to be done. And I think having new players, like some of the online or whatever, I think will shake this industry up, right? Just like how in retail commerce have been done, right? And then suddenly all the Walmarts, everybody has online. So I think that is one part that needs to change. I think in addition, actually, there are two other parts that are often neglected in the healthcare system. One is the more preventive, the chronic disease stuff, the wellness part. And I think particularly in Southeast Asia, as we're kind of always in that, as you say, in the middle, kind of income area and is slowly grow. This is the period, I think, the next 10 years where people start to also want to be well. I mean, our lifespan now, depending, has at least reached to, I think Indonesia's right, 67, 70. Right. Basically between, I think those are solvable problems. But the problem, even in like Singapore, which is like 80, and then I think in China it's like 79 or something. The last 10 years is sickness. So
it's gone up.
Yeah, so it's gone up. And so this prevent part, actually this particularly chronic disease, diabetes, hypertension, these are common diseases for us. Even tuberculosis, these are, I think this part, with a lot of AI prediction model of who are the ones likely to have problems, and working the public healthcare system to get screening, vaccination, and then getting the consumer actually engaged on the app itself. It's a bit like the revolution we went through in financial services. In the beginning, we all worked through our intermediaries, right? The bank is just a product engine, and we work through sales or brokers or third-party distribution. You never reach the customer, right? We spent a lot of effort in the past 10 years getting the customer to be direct, right, on the app, so you can get to know them and do it. Healthcare has to do that too. And if you can do it, I've seen, we have 1 million diabetes patients on our app. They go through these 15-day camp to control. I mean, it's no rocket science. It's about diet, exercise, checking and stuff. But at first we get nurses to sign like 30, 40 people up through peer pressure, a whole bunch of things to get them inculcated, give you awards. It was very human intensive. Later on, we start to more and more use machine learning to do it. So now it's 80, 90% administered by the bot, right? You can now take picture, immediately show you good, not good, etc. So I think these things will have huge impact, particularly I think for Southeast Asia, where we are quite young and growing population, and we are very tech savvy. And I think the third part, and I think this is more pockets, right? In certain cities, because we are also very diverse, right? Each country is also very diverse. We also have more aging type population. And we don't have, as you said, enough doctors or even nurses. Right? I went to Japan.
Doctors, nurses, and beds.
That's right. And I went to Japan. The Japanese elderly are so fortunate. Even the government, 90% paid for government retirement homes. They have one care worker looking after 3 to 4 person, and they will even note down how many times you woke up at night, how many times you went to the toilet, did you poop, not poop, And so, but we're not Japan. They started doing this, several decades ago, making 40-year-olds pay into insurance. But I think we could be pockets of aged care, whereby we have to build the industry a bit, right? In China, even this is a problem, because in China there's 217 million people above 65 years old, right? 6 times more than Japan. And 90% of Asians want to retire at home. So you have to think about, how do I deliver something between 65 to 85 years old? This is when they're retired, but they still live and they want to live well. And I think this is a whole industry. It's actually a whole sector to be set up. And you have to make it...
That's Indonesia, 280 million people.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's true. This is many old people. And so it's very difficult.
They don't have enough young people to help these guys.
That's right.
As
that's
nurses
right.
or what.
And they also want to live, happily by themselves at homes. The one-child policy made it because many times their kids are not even in the same city. So I think and we have pockets of that, right? Because of our population in Southeast Asia, there are also pockets of Asia, and they're neglected, right? If a government is richer, maybe you can look after. Yeah. But if not, you have to find a way to build that up. Right? So I think that is another area that I think will increasingly become important. Yeah.
How do you deal with rising cases of mental illnesses? If you take a look at the report from the Surgeon General, it's anxiety, depression, and to some extent suicides, right, in the US. And that's kind of happening in many other parts of the world, including here in Southeast Asia.
Yes.
Will AI be able to help stuff like this?
Yeah, it's tough. Firstly, I believe, I believe 70% of us have some mental. I probably like, a little bit too anxious. Some form, right? It's a mental. Actually, once you get
but it's a real issue.
It's a real issue, and particularly for younger
the Z
folks,
Z generation
is a huge issue. Any parts of the world, and it's even exacerbated because if you talk about psychiatrists and psychologists, there's even less regulated than the doctors. Right? Many countries, psychologists are not even regulated. Where you can, in China, you can pay 4,000 yuan. That's divided by less than 1,000 sing, 800 sing, and you could be certified as a psychologist. And the worst thing is that if the psychologist is not credible, it's going to be worse for the patient because only you, the patient, and the psychologist know what's happening. So I think this is a huge problem. I really believe we really believe AI could help. And I think it's not just us. Even I think Facebook at some point created something called Warbot. I remember maybe 5-6 years ago. So there've been creations like this. It hasn't worked out as well. I think the challenge. We spent a year looking at this. We pushed really hard. The problem is that this industry itself is not very regulated. It's actually harder. At first, I thought it was easier. It's harder because all the other diseases I talked about, there's a clinical pathway. There is a right answer. It's a very deterministic. Oh, if you have X, Y, Z, you do this, you check this, and then it's a flow chart. You can see it, right? And so it's easier for machines to learn, right? I realized that different schools of psychologists and psychiatrists, and I actually went to some to experience how it's like. There are many different, and fundamentally, they don't even have a way. I asked them, how do you measure that the patient is better? It's not. It's very subjective. So I think that's part of the problem. But I do think if it has to be solved, I think AI is probably the way to do it. But you have to work with the association. You almost have to redefine the rules.
A bit more objectivity into the equation.
That's right. And classify them in more different cases. Because I think Gen AI is one whereby you can really build rapport. Because the worst about psychologists is actually the softer skills, right? How do you build the rapport and the trust and get the person to do something? And this is what Gen AI should be very good at. But I think, if I'm sure there's enough people, this will be an area of huge impact.
There's a lot of conversations, if not discourses, on longevity and even immortality. How do you see AI getting involved in the healthcare space in ushering this whatever illusion that we could live as long as we want, or we can live much longer than just 70 or 80 years?
It's I think in the short-term horizon, right? I think short, medium, long term. I think short-term horizon, the biggest challenge is going to be actually economic. When you talk about longevity, even at 80 years old, and with a retirement age 65, most countries would not be able to support.
And you're not that productive.
That's right. If you look at replacement income, look at what is provided by the government, by the employer pension, by your own savings. I think the first challenge we'll say is just economic, right? Just living to 80. How do you make sure that everyone, when they retire, have at least 55% of their income when they were working? I think that's challenge one. Challenge two is going to be, I think, a social challenge. And as my parents aged too, that's how the past 5 years I got really interested in this area, because I think, oh gosh, it's such an unsolved space. This 65 to 85 is really like chapter 3 of your life. It's 20 years, long years. I only worked for 25 years.
I'm getting there soon.
I was like, and actually at 65, you're still well. Because we've improved so much. If you're 65, 85, in fact, you can do much more, and you want to do much more. But you have to, how do you do that? So that's why, and 90% wants to stay at home, 10%, 7% wants to be in community, 3% wants to work. So socially, how do you support this? And then also getting them to work, right? So I think the Japanese does this extremely well. A third of their elderly in this population. I don't think they call elderly. I don't find the right name to do that. So
Mature.
they actually, yeah, mature. You got to get them to work, right? So since I came back to Singapore this year, I've been working with some of the Singapore organization. We're doing some pilots whereby how do you do within the community, get them to contribute, right? Maybe sustainable, right? So my girl was trying to get the old people to do food composting in the gardens, together, getting them socially engaged, doing micro work. Maybe in US, they do babysitting and stuff like that, because it's about social, mental engagement, physical, the whole well-being of, you can still live an exciting life. This is the chapter 3 with no other obligations except yourself. So I think this social challenge is going to hit us quite soon. And I don't see people caring enough to do this, and I think it needs to be solved. And I think it's then the longer term, which is that can 80 be 100, 120, right? And there are many kind of research studies showing that technically your body, the signs of aging is not if you think of, I think one of the Harvard guys I was reading
Sinclair.
said, it's actually, yeah, that's right, Sinclair.
Sinclair,
aging, you should treat it, people have accepted,
just got to take a bunch
aging
of
is like this.
NMNs.
It's like this. It's not. It's a disease that can be treated. Yeah. Right. I think that would take some time.
He tells you to take more NMNs.
That's right. That's right. There are many such things.
I thought it first sounded like M&Ms.
No, if you see in Japan, I went to one of the homes. This lady was 106-year-old. She's very small. She's so energetic. She was very happy. She doesn't speak a word of English. She took pictures with us. She was excited. I mean, it's so unlike what you see in the retirement homes, right? So given that you have seen cases like this, right? And even though I'm not a research scientist there, I believe it's got to be solvable. But I think this one, I think this is not a 10, perhaps even longer time frame. I've come to realize that working in healthcare, we are very good at diagnostic things we can see. But it's very hard when you talk, because we've been talking about precision medicine.
Right.
Predictive for quite some time. I think it's going to take a while.
On AI, do you see AI getting further decoupled between the US and China?
Yeah, I think it is possible. In my past 20 years, I use telecoms as an example. If you remember when I had my first Motorola, Nokia.
Late
I think that was 2G.
2000s, yeah.
And then later 3G. I worked in the telecoms industry for a while.
I remember the Blackberries
3G.
too.
That's right. Oh, yes, the Blackberries. Yes. And then in 3G, there were like 3 standards. There was a GSM, there was a CDMA, there was a TDS CDMA, which China came out. I think Japan has its own standard too, right? 3, 4 standards. And it was really 4G onwards that ITU started to integrate, and then we've now taken it for granted, right? 5G, 6G. I think it's possible that for certain types of technology, you'll start to see variants of them, and we have to deal with different things that try to make it interoperable at certain places, right? I think that's probably true. We're already beginning to see on the phones, right? You now have different operating systems and software. And the trick now is going to be, I think, in the country's interest, because if you look from a company, or people always want you to be in a closed ecosystem, one ecosystem. But I think as countries which are not the 2 countries in contention, we want to embrace everything, right? That's Southeast Asia. We're a place of diversity, and that's opportunities. So I think the key is, how do we use hopefully these international bodies, that we don't throw everything out or start to split into 2, that I think Southeast Asia and actually much of the global South, which actually most of the population, try to have interoperability, right? You're going to have your own different brands of stuff. But when you talk about for the good of certain things, right? Let's say you talk about healthcare, right? Healthcare records, if you don't have a seamless healthcare records, you can't do anything that we talked about, right? That's the base stuff. It's the base infrastructure. So I think if we have terms on how we do that, at the same time providing privacy, IP, etc. Right? And I think it can be done. These technical challenges are usually the least of the worry. I think it would allow us to survive in this kind of more multilateral kind of world.
So you see prospect for the sustenance of interoperability?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I think it has to be
not just for Southeast Asia, but
yes,
for most parts of the world.
Yes, yes. And I think in the past, this is not a new concept, but I think in the past 10, 15 years, it has not been high on the priority, right? I remember when blockchain first became like really, and people talked about, oh, you got to be on the Ethereum chain, or you got to be this, right? And there was a group of us who really argued for interoperability, right? I think, so that thought has always been there, but because the opportunity within each, so everyone wants to chase to be that standard and stuff. So no one has really paid attention to that. But if you think about this, I think this is one way of ensuring we are still globally connected, yet with slightly different different forces, if you will. And hopefully that will be a mitigating factor and not a complete reversal. Yeah.
Yeah, you take into account this, call it decoupling or de-risking, right? You juxtapose that with data points on global trade, still very robust. It just shows that economic activities are still very intertwined.
Yes.
Right? And I see the argument for the sustenance of interoperability.
Yes.
Because you're gonna be so sore without it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Economically, socially, what have you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And frankly, the bulk of the consumer, we grow up in benefiting from this. Right? In the US, we had really cheap everything. In fact, at one point, it was cheaper because of the export credit buying from the US than, let's say, the place it was manufactured. So hopefully there's sufficient clout within the people right now. They say, look, yes, there are flaws with anything. There are some imbalances or new forces in geopolitics. But let's not throw everything that we've worked, I think, for the past 30 plus years on. And hopefully we find that. And like you said, the robust data is a positive sign. Yeah.
Last bit on AI. I've been spending a bit of time in the Bay Area. It's an observation that it tends to get pushed forth in a much more technological manner. And it doesn't seem to rope in other disciplines enough. I mean, I feel like the culturalists, the socialists, sociologists, environmentalists, economists, spiritualists, philosophers, I think they need to be roped in. And this is with full cognizance of the fact that the technologies are so damn smart.
Yeah.
But they tend to think that they know everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
They're not roping in. They're not having coffee with people of different dimensions. And I fear, or I'm a bit concerned, that at the rate that it's not being pushed forth in an adequately multidisciplinary manner, it might end up in a pretty non-benign manner. Yeah. This hallucination.
Yeah, yeah. It's true that given where things are going now, it is dominated by a few big players.
Right.
It is dominated even from a tech side. When you talk about engagement, I'm not even yet there at the philosophy, other disciplines.
Right.
Even in the business side, right? So people talk about AI for AI.
Right.
Right. You haven't heard as much some of the things we were talking about, because in this part of the world, we are more about solving the actual issues. This is just a means to an end.
Right.
And I think even that hasn't really happened. Now it's about a new piece of technology. And so I think that swing has to be calibrated more about what is it really going to be used at. So I think that's the first thing to happen. And of course, as you said, because it's such a new thing, regulators, people are still trying to figure out the implications of all of this, right? Particularly Gen I, as you say, hallucination. Where should you use it? Where should you not use it? What should you hold who accountable, right? The rules of the game have changed. And I think these debates needs to be had. But I'm a believer of market-driven, right? That it's very hard when you're not even sure what to come out, and there's a risk of either over-regulating or not trying it. And so I think the onus is actually on the government and the regulators to keep a balance between, how do you still encourage use of it, but keep your eyes wide open, right? And have these discussions about and debates then before you formulate, okay, this is gotta be it, right? And if you look at in the history, that's kind of a little bit how things have happened. Now, of course, we would likely miss out on certain things. That's why, some of the antitrust thing always backwards looking, but it would calibrate a little bit more. But I think the second one is something actually I worry more. And I think actually Asia, having spent more time, that's what I like about Asia. I think in Asia, it's a very different vibe because we are so much in need. When you are, in developed markets, when you have a lot of, that's why I talk about the medical imaging, they don't deploy it because they're worried that the radiologists will run out of job, right? So, and they say, okay, it's nice to have, right? But in Asia, where we are all desperate for more, right? I think actually use case and scaling up should be done here quite well. We just need, as you said, we need that access to the core tech, the people, right? And then we are very entrepreneurial people. Southeast Asia is really one of the most diverse regions that we're in. And then it will flourish. It will flourish significantly. I really hope to see lots of things in education. There's so many things that can be done. So many things, but people talk about it. Very few people really actually do it. And if we can convince more people, I think it will be fantastic. Yeah.
Something just popped again in my head. Last bit on AI. It's more of an engineering challenge, right? AI.
Yeah.
It's not a software challenge. And when one talks about engineering, it's about the few that have the money to do it, scale, right? And I fear that at the rate that there's only few that can spend the money, it runs the risk of further elitizing the narrative, right? The pre-existing order, which would have been a bit more elitized than necessary, right? We're seeing rising Gini coefficient ratios all over the world. China, the US, Africa, Southeast Asia. Inequality of wealth, inequality of income, inequality of opportunities, centripetality of economic development. When the only few have access to money to scale for engineering purposes, for AI purposes, are they going to be thinking about the rest of the planet?
Yeah.
Right? Intuitively, I'm just thinking, I don't think so, as much as I would like.
Yeah.
Right?
It is, this is do we call it the digital divide or something? It is, but I'm a little bit more optimistic.
Okay.
I think it can go either way.
Yeah.
It's a bit like what you use it for, good or evil. If you use it, if it continues to be controlled in a few handful of companies,
right,
with the purpose of making more money, then it's gonna be more and more diverse, right? More and more diverse. I think if it opens up entrepreneurship, whereby people have been talking about democratizing AI in Silicon Valley for like a decade, right? I think if that can really be realized, and I think there are some people who really believe in that, and enable many people to actually create that. It could go the other way and lessen the divide, right? So I'll use I talked about the friend I don't know whether he'd be successful, but in this early education Gen AI startup, right? One of the things that they're doing is also building off the foundation models. And then, you can imagine that could be opened up like a library of modules or models and APIs and stuff, and allow lots of different entrepreneurs, startups, to create different applications on top, right? Now, this concept as a business model is not new, right? You have games who would open up some, like Roblox, I think they open up APIs and then people can develop various games on it, right? If we could steer that in that direction, right, really democratizing AI, as you talked about, right? And then that would unleash, because this is, again, and something that Asia, Southeast Asia in particular, we're very good at this. There's tons of entrepreneurs everywhere. I mean, look at, e-commerce, all the sellers, they come from like all part Asia of the world. There are many small sellers. They will understand the local market, the nuances, etc. But we need to lower the cost of them doing the business, right? And so that's why I was so excited when you said that you were saying out the Southeast Asian Center in Stanford. Right? We need more people who has the ability, right? You talk about money and the talents to deploy that to areas where we need it, right? Yeah. We're doing this not to get more advertising revenues or whatever. We're trying to solve real humanity, social, economic problems. And if we could get that to do it, actually the amount of investment we're talking about, they're all different level, right? I just made a case to one of the financial services regulator, right? And we're talking about how if you want to do AI, you get into problem sharing data, which is privacy concern, right? So I shared this, look, you got to get into federated learning, privacy, computing, right? Whereby now we are actually able to build models. Used to be everybody put their data together and then you train the models together, right? But actually federated learning privacy is such that you're now able to build models while data is with you, data is with me, right? It takes a few iterations. Sure. Okay, and that's, to me, a breakthrough thing. And we've done it now in China. It took a while. We worked with even the regulator, PBOC, to do that in some of the anti-money laundering, etc. It doesn't take a lot. I have probably about 10 to 15 people who are experts in the area that basically have sustained them for a while to really do this. But when they can break through in one use case, then do others. So I think if we could channel that a little bit, it'd be really exciting. And I think back to your point about you, what I'm encouraged is also the younger generation, right? Your teens, 20s, even the early 30s. Right. They're full of passion to do that. I particularly feel that in Indonesia, she's always been very vibrant, entrepreneurial. People want to do stuff, right? And you get frustrated when you don't have the ability to do it. So if we could lessen that and provide this platform, I think it could really do wonders. Yeah.
I'm not worried about entrepreneurialism in Southeast Asia.
Exactly.
But I think it needs to be supplanted with certain attributes, one of which is liquidity. Yeah. And I think to get liquidity,
liquidity as in
money.
Yeah.
Capital.
Okay.
Economic capital. Yeah. Technological capital is there. Economic capital is there beyond Southeast Asia. They just need to figure a way to get those in a sensible manner. Yeah. And we just don't have enough storytelling capabilities. You're a great storyteller for Southeast Asia. Yes. But we need thousands of you. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Indians, they're so great at telling stories. Yeah. I just wish, we're 700 million people. Yeah. Yeah. We're not a small potato.
Yes, yes.
We got to have as many or almost as many storytellers like India would have.
Yes. We've been, as I said, we've been trained all to just do
quietly,
goes back to your
earlier point,
hunter down, and we will do
thinking
well.
That you're going to get recognized.
Yes,
somebody's going to pat your shoulders, and not going to happen in a much more multipolar kind of world. You have to seek attention differently. Yeah. And I do believe, our mission whether it's in the context of that center at Stanford or, whatever we're doing right now, is to inspire people, as many people as possible, to be better storytellers. Now, we've spent a lot of time, Jess, on so many things. What would be your message to the young girls or women out there in the villages and secondary cities and primary cities of Southeast Asia, so that they could be a Jessica Tan?
Yeah.
I mean, you've gone to the pinnacle of one of the coolest organizations in the world. I mean, a global giant, and you're there. I mean, in a somewhat male-dominated kind of region, of Southeast Asia. What will make it possible for thousands of them to be like you, if not better?
So yes, I grew up, as I said, very traditional family. I remember when I was 8 years old and my grandfather died. I mentioned my dad was the eldest child, so my sisters and I were the only grandchildren, and our names couldn't be even on the tomb of my grandfather. And they made up 4 fictitious names of grandsons they will have in the future. So I joked to my cousin that, I'm so sorry for you that your names are decided way before you were starting, right? So that's kind of the background. And I remember working in Southeast Asia, the kind of 6-7 years I was leading McKinsey Southeast Asia for FIG and tech. Someone told me to politely that, you should walk half a step behind the male client. And of course, I'm being educated in the US, so all these are lost on me. So there are a lot of direct, also hidden prejudices, right? Even in China, as I said, even though the communism have really kind of changed that mix a bit, but there are also some of my reports sometimes. They would tell me, but she's a woman. So I said, why? What's wrong with, I want to promote her. She's going to have kids, so she's going to be out from maternity. I'm like, you idiot. you were born by your mother too. So I think there are such kind of biases, sometimes willingly, sometimes not willingly, subconscious, and that you have to go through. I tell my girls, since I'm blessed with 2 girls, I think girls are wonderful, and that I think one is that we shouldn't feel apologetic, and we should be confident. And even if we're rejected, we just keep asking for it. There's no harm. I mean, if I have to kiss 100 frogs before I get my prince, I will kiss 100 frogs. And you shouldn't feel bad because and don't take it. Sometimes we might take it personally. So I've seen also some go the other way, become very strong. That's why she said, I'm not surprised when you ask me, will you be tougher there? Because there are also some stereotypes where they become tougher because it's very hard to get there. So they want to show their, whiter than white in a sense. So I think because self-resilience is actually one, right? It takes a long time to change systems. Right. I mean, any systems. I was just reading the American history book, right? And you forgot, the black took 100 years to kind of for Abraham Lincoln to do, and another 100 years, and still ongoing, right? So it takes a long time to do that. So I think this confidence to do it is more important. And then I think whatever position that we are in, we have to also then change some of the system where we see not right. I mentioned about the maternity leave. So one of the things I did in my 10 companies was that I instituted, because usually every corporate has you need to be, let's say, a certain performance level, like top 40% for 2 years before you can get the promotion, right? So usually women sometimes might lose out if you go for maternity or something, or childcare leave. You miss one because you didn't work half the year of that, so you'd be ranked lower, and then they will miss basically one whole few years, right? So I instituted, it's not just for female, for male, any valid reason that it's not their fault that they are ranked lower, we'll have a special debate about this, and we will not risk them. We might still promote them, right? So these are very small things, but I think this is part about us tweaking the system. And as leaders, we inherit a system, and when we leave that position, we should make that system better, right? So if we all can tweak a little bit, I think that would that will help significantly. And then maybe last message is that I think we don't need to feel like we have to be like someone, like a male or whatever. It so happens I can drink, and I sometimes like to drink a little bit, but you don't have to. I don't play golf. So my male colleagues may go play golf. Some of my female colleagues also learn golf. I don't enjoy the game. I enjoy a faster game. Like tennis. I think golf is for old people. But it doesn't. So they get the benefit. But I think it's the essence of it, right? It is important to have time with your colleagues outside work, to have that back to the bonding kind of, so that we know each other as people and we enjoy and want to work together, right? So if we don't do golf, do something else. I sing, so we go karaoke. We go. I'm a Buddhist, so I go to temples. But nice temple. We go for like a retreat. We talk about things. You drink tea. Right? It doesn't matter what. So I think we should be comfortable about our own leadership style. We don't have to feel like we have to conform to certain standards. If I don't do this, is it that I will be cut out? I think that part. I think if we do that, and there's sufficient of us, I think it would make a huge difference.
Knowing that confidence is key.
Yeah.
What small tips can you give to young people that they can do to cultivate confidence?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people know that confidence is what
Yes.
it takes, but they don't know how to train to be confident.
Yeah, I think they have to. So when my girls, I don't care about the grades. I mean, if the grades will be whether the grades won't be. I care more about you have a passion, and that you go do something about it. Right. So my eldest daughter loves psychology, youth empowerment. She will go to girls' home. She will volunteer and stuff. My second girl is about sustainability. She food compost and all that stuff. Correct. So I encourage them. I think confidence needs to be built up. Just like for me, I started off quite. I think I was given when I first joined McKinsey. They gave me this kind of like office award, most likely to be corrupted. Because I was so demure. And quiet. It's very different. And then, but because you keep trying, right? You raise a hand, you ask something, you do something, and I try to encourage them to not take no for us. So, like my daughter who wants to do food composting, so she wants to learn to be certified. She doesn't want to just read off the internet and then go teach a bunch of other people doing it. And it took a long time. She wrote to various organizations. People ignore her or say, please go to this website. So I was very concerned because I don't want children to be disappointed, because if they get rejected too many times at a young age, they were just like, okay, then, I'll just do whatever, right? So I really push, I called everybody I know. I said, look, I'm really sorry. Could you get something? So but even for me, it took a month to get someone. It was a former. She was the former CEO of HDB, and I said, "I'm really sorry to call you. I know you're retired, but I read somewhere HDB does this things. Could you please?" And she really did. And they went. I saw how the girls became more confident. They did. Then they after that went to teach their students, more students, and so it builds up, right? And then once they do this, they will know, oh, next time I can do another one better. So I think confidence has to be built. And then whether as parents or teachers, I think it's about kind of helping them, sponsoring so that they don't get burned out at the beginning. And then once to a certain level, I think they will then start to take bigger and bigger risks. Because as you said, I really believe the youth of this generation are much better than when I was there. We just study. I was a late bloomer, so they have so much more. They will do so much better. I think with the right kind of environment to do that. Yeah,
I think the kids need to know that slipping or falling while trying is okay.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
I was reading this book, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt from NYU. he was making reference to how there's a sense of under protection with respect to offline activities, and overprotection with respect to offline activities, and underprotection with respect to online activities.
Okay.
With the current generation.
Why did he say?
Well, a little example is like, when we were in our time, when we would cross the street, our parents wouldn't care.
No, that's right. We learned how to cross the street.
There's cars and motorcycles, let us learn.
Yeah.
Whereas now we're a bit more protective, right, with our kids. Okay. Oh, kids, be careful. Okay. There's a car coming. There's a what? But we tend to be much more underprotective.
Yes.
When it comes to online activities.
Yeah.
And we have no idea. We have no control over what they look at on their mobile phones.
Yeah.
Outside the 30 minutes that we spend with them over dinner.
Yeah.
Or lunch or whatever. And they look at the mobile devices for 8 to 10 hours a day. And there's a lot of bad stuff on that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. That's true.
He seems to correlate that.
Yeah.
With, mental illnesses. And also he calls it spiritual degradation.
Okay. But if that's the case, well, the good point is that you can be influenced online. Yeah. Which, if used for good, frankly, could be more effective than offline. Then you can do a slight correction to actually influence them on the more inspirational or positive stuff.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm a little bit it's controversial. Most of my friends restrict time on mobile devices because I'm in this industry. I freely I take it as my job to actually try the new devices. So all my old devices, everyone has many versions. I don't restrict any. But I think I was inspired by my second girl. She's more digitally gifted, literate. She suddenly, there are only two things I make my girls learn: music and coding. This is a non-negotiable because to me, a language. Right? It's like you don't need to be a musician, but if you didn't learn it, you cannot appreciate it, right? And coding is like language to machines. So they all protested against it, but they all love it. But anyway, my second girl for coding, one day she came to me when she was, I think, 13 or so, and she wanted to program games. She asked if the kind of teacher she has, she can learn to, because she saw on YouTube. She plays a lot of games. She just lies there and plays. She's a gamer. And this guy learned Unity and was able to program his own game in 2 days. And she said, I want to do my own game. And she created a little mushroom game that just keeps jumping. It's a very simplistic game. But I was really, and these days they get information from stuff like she was reading. There was this simplified this whole series of videos on YouTube, and then what is a tyrant, and then she was reading like Hitler, and she was arguing with me about tyrant and stuff. And so I was impressed. No, but like you said, the problem is that kids at a younger age, they are not at the phase of being able to discern facts, easily influence, right? You need to channel the energy in the right way. But if it can be. The good thing about digital is that it can be scaled up, right?
Your daughter is lucky to have the mother as a co-CEO of Ping An. So the conversations are very different.
Yes,
right?
That's right. I know.
Compare that with conversations
that's right.
elsewhere.
So the question is, how do you take some of that, right? Because AI is very simple. AI is about learning what the best people do. Yeah. And then be able to replicate. That's how we train our bots. We took the top 10%. So for me, it's always about, can it be done? Right? If it can be done in one case, then let's figure out all the other conditions that you can scale up. I think digitally that's the benefit of that. It's not going to be as easy, but actually we have higher chance than offline. Because imagine if it's something that I can only influence offline, you got to first influence A people, then B people, and then it's geographically, and then it's hard to determine quality. Then I think that would be a harder challenge.
That's true if you've got the right person at that zip code that knows how to tell everybody within that zip code what to look at.
Yes.
Right?
So, I mean, I think you opened just now about Southeast Asia, some of the things were lacking.
Yeah.
I think governance is actually one very important one because with so few resources, both capital and people, you need good orchestrators to be able to put it in the right area.
Yeah.
And I've seen like in China sometimes when you have a good mayor or something, suddenly the whole city, problems that haven't been solved for decades, it just gets solved. And I think that kind of balance, if we could do that, could perhaps make a lot of difference. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask you the last question.
Of course.
If we spend more than 2 hours. AI. When I get asked what AI can do, I try to simplify the answer. It really is supposed to make people healthier, wealthier, smarter. We've talked about all these three attributes. Yeah. But the fourth one is, I think, happier.
Yeah, okay. Oh, that's really tough.
What makes you happy?
Yeah, that's right.
Define happiness.
Yeah, happy is very elusive.
Well, I hope AI is going to help humanity with becoming smarter, healthier, wealthier.
Yeah. No, but I love that you're pushing for happy because it's so it's ironic that some countries are richer, healthier, not happy. And that's really sad. Very sad. And I remember reading some of the university. I think in some of the university in US, they actually have a center for happiness. So, well, for me, I think I'm a very simple person. There's two parts of me: the family part, and then the professional part. Right? And the family part, for me, is a base. I once in a while on the sheet of paper I'll draw a little bit kind of where I am and stuff like that. So I always put like a house. Last I draw was about, I think in October last year. And so for me, my family, my extended family of 10 people, there are certain goals that they all have, and I'm here to enable. And if they're happy, I'm happy. I think that's for me the most important. So you can see throughout my journey, I never let it compromise that. And particularly because I was in New York during 9/11, and for me, life is so short. I take planes so often. So I think that keeps me grounded. And then I'm happy if my professional life, I made a difference. Right? I have impact, the ability to, create a difference. I don't want to do more of the same. It's not about money. And I think a lot of the problems now these days is people run businesses because of maybe the quarterly earnings or whatever. Money making becomes the purpose. It's not. Actually, whole point of business is that what's your original purpose, right? Is to improve healthcare or whatever, right? And then making money is the kind of to make it economically sustainable. So I ask for myself, particularly at this point, I'm very lucky, that my parents' generation, where they had to work, in such a, at least I'm able to think about what I want to do professionally and can choose what you want to do. So it's about having impact in the business, in the sector. It made a difference as a model that a lot of things that we talked about that will give me great pride and happiness. And that the people who are involved, and it's a more multi-stakeholder. We talk about sustainability, and you define it. A sustainable business is not just profit shareholder. It's about your employees. It's about the customers, of course, environment, as well as we. And now I think people now talk about ESG, but they talk it more as a kind of tick the box. Very few businesses really kind of think about that. So I'll be very happy if I'm able to do something, at least within my sphere. And I think that would, hopefully inspire more people and we do better. Yeah. I wouldn't have lived my life in vain. Yeah.
Amen. Amen. Jess, thank you so much for
my
your
pleasure.
time.
My pleasure. Thanks for coming. Yeah. All the best. Yeah.
That was Jessica Tan, the former co-CEO of Ping An Group. Thank you. Inilah Endgame.